Coming to you from the Windy City. Welcome to Let's Talk Shop, a podcast about all things cloud and enterprise tech. Listen to insights and guest interviews with IT thought leaders and professionals. Now, here's your host, Elias Kanaser.
So there's a lot of talk about AI and GenAI and edge and latency and distributed cloud and all of these things. And I have an awesome guest today that is going to help us dissect all of this, albeit from a Google Cloud perspective, but still one of the top three hyperscalers. It is my great pleasure to welcome Brad Bonnett, a Senior Director of Product, Google Distributed Cloud. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Excited to see how I can help your viewers learn more about Google Cloud and more about kind of what we're seeing out in the marketplace.
So let me start with what's in your title, which is Google Distributed Cloud. I love the product, but just in case we have viewers and listeners that don't know what Google Distributed Cloud is, maybe you can help me frame the conversation. What is Google Distributed Cloud?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to get started. So ultimately, what we have learned over time is that Google believes that the cloud is the best place we could possibly run the vast majority of applications. But we know not everything can run there. And so the distributed cloud is what we've been building that really enables customers to go and solve those problems. And it really comes down to kind of four big areas that we see. Typically, it's some type of like regulatory compliance, and that varies wildly depending on the kind of country, the workload, the data that you have, and what are the specific controls that you potentially need. Sometimes it's connectivity. We have a big announcement that we did in Q4 with McDonald's. And so that's all about how do they make sure that their stores are running every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, independent of what internet connectivity has for them. Sometimes it's real time. So we see that with manufacturing customers who have want to do real time inference on their lines, or retailers who are maybe streaming cameras and want to do inference on. And then the last but not least is data volume, right? So I might have so much data that I want to process that locally versus sending all of that data up to the cloud. And so what we did is we built distributed cloud to be everything outside of our hyperscale data centers.
So is it fair to say it's a slice, it's a nugget, it's a station, it's a part of Google Cloud that is carved out to the edge or on-prem? Is it a different version? Is it the same look and feel, same user experience?
Yeah, there's a number of questions in there. So let me see if I can kind of try to answer them one at a time. First and foremost, what we see it as an extension of your cloud, right? And so while the vast majority of those workloads are going to be running in Google Cloud, the ones that can't, you're going to push those out to Google Distributed Cloud, wherever that happens to be. Additionally, we find, we like to say ultimate cosmic power, but itty bitty living space. And so while it's very similar and a lot of the aspects are almost exactly the same, you have to think differently when you're running on, let's say, a 3-node edge cluster and how you develop and deploy your applications than if you're running on Google Cloud and you can spin up 10,000 nodes in a matter of seconds, run your application and then spin those down. And so we've been really thoughtful to make it different where it needs to be different, so it really empowers you in your workloads, and make it the same everywhere we can make it the same.
I love that answer. And that's one of the few times where I've heard anyone put an emphasis on that, because usually folks try to say, they try to hide kind of some of the limitations, but I love the idea of understand that, hey, you're running on a 3-node, maybe even 4-node, 10-node, whatever it is, but it's very different than the unlimited capabilities you have on the hyperscaler, on Google Cloud in this case. So your deployment, your architecture will be different. But let me challenge you a little bit on this. So for the longest time, and this is not just Google Cloud, I think all of the cloud providers are guilty of this. For the longest time, all the cloud providers were kind of saying, hey, you got to migrate to the cloud. I mean, all of the things you referenced, there are solutions for them in the cloud, whether it's, encryption, whether you're holding your own keys, air gap. I mean, there's a bunch of solutions that we can address to each and every one of them. But it feels like now all of the cloud providers, Google included, are now making this pivot on the emphasis on the edge, on the on-prem data center. Why do you feel that is? Do you feel like, hey, there is a true, you guys have come to a true realization that, hey, not everything can really work in the cloud? Or are you just taking advantage of a little bit of backlash from the data center folks? Is it the Gen AI hype? Is it all of the above?
No. I think it's a great question. And I think it comes down to us just continuing to listen to our customers. And really, I think from a Google perspective and my team, we always try to say, how do I help drive the best ROI for my customers? And so that's why, like, the vast majority of the time, you nailed it. Like, you can almost move every infinite time and infinite resources depending on the workload, but sometimes that's just not going to make the most economic sense. And so what we've been doing by being really specific with customers is understanding. And so with a number of customers that we have, sometimes let's take migration, right? Migration and modernizing. A lot of stuff, it's very easy to migrate to the cloud and you can get a quick ROI. Then you could be modernizing that application and start driving faster feature development and better outcomes for your business. Other applications, sometimes it's a lot more work and you might have to modernize in place. And so maybe it doesn't make sense to move it immediately to the cloud because you're not going to get those benefits. And you can't, as a central IT or a technology organization, just tell the rest of your business, hey, give me 2 years. I'm going to modernize this architecture, and then I'm going to start delivering new features. And so what we're trying to do is help people really maximize that ROI for their business and say, hey, how do we help you get to value faster? How do we help you modernize in place where you need to, or help you solve these problems so that ultimately you can drive what you're trying to do, which is better business outcomes. That might be in speed of feature delivery or agility or whatever it happens to be. Ultimately, that's everything we're trying to do. And what we're finding is by listening deeply to our customers, understanding their needs, sometimes we need to be where they are. And so that's why we've been investing in Google Distributed Cloud.
Okay, so the other cloud providers have been doing the same. I mean, AWS has Outpost, Microsoft has Azure Stack, Oracle has at Customer, yada, yada, yada. What differentiates GDC? Why is GDC different? How is it different than an Outpost or an Azure Stack for that matter?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways, right? So I'm going to start first with the fact that we're part of a larger ecosystem, right? And so one of the things I love most about Google Cloud is not only Google Cloud itself and the things that we can do with AI and data, but also our world-beating network infrastructure, right? So we've been building infrastructure for search, for YouTube, for decades. And actually, that's the foundation of Google Distributed Cloud. This is the same infrastructure that we've been managing YouTube's caching network for the last 15 years, right? So we're used to managing infrastructure in far-flung places to be doing that. And so how do you manage fleets of instances in 1,000 locations is what kind of is the foundation of Google Distributed Cloud. And so part of the beauty of it is we always like to say, how do we minimize Google Distributed Cloud when you're deploying it, which is an interesting thing to say as a product owner of this is like, hey, I want to enable you to use the least of my product possible. But ultimately, that's what we think is going to drive the best ROI for our customers. And one of the best aspects is because we're part of this larger family of products and features and functionality of Google. So you get to take advantage of our world-class network infrastructure and cross-cloud connect so that you have some of the best latency in the world to our regions, which means for many applications, you don't have to use distributed cloud. That's one piece, right? So taking advantage of the larger Google Cloud infrastructure. Second is data management and AI, right? So we've been building this something that's different. Not only do you get Gemini and all those aspects that you get with our own in-house systems, but because we're open as a kind of one of our main value props in the ways that we approach the world, we're also bringing in other customers or other LLMs, other types of AI infrastructure so that you have the freedom of choice, right? We always say we want to compete for your business, but we don't want to force you to use our own our software because we want to allow you to use best in class. And so one of the things we're always trying to do, no matter if it's our connected aspects or even our air gapped, we say, hey, you can find best in class open source services, and we're going to empower you to use those. So you can take those developers that are used to using Spark. they're used to using Kafka, they're used to using Kubernetes, and they can come use it on our system and be delivering value for your business or your government entity or whatever it happens to be immediately.
So if I can pivot just a little bit, because I feel like those things are going to be connected. So you talk to a lot of customers. There's a lot of hype these days around AI. The only conversation in town is AI these days, and
Yeah.
Gen AI in particular, right? So from your conversations, from your travels with customers, what are some of the challenges that you see out there for AI, and maybe how can GDC solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, I think it's been really fun. It's been a great time to work in this industry and to be talking to customers. And I would say the big theme that I'm hearing is everyone's now saying like, look, I know kind of what Gen AI is. I'm starting to see how to use it. I've been playing with it in my data center. I've been playing with it on the cloud, and people are ready to start moving into production. And that's where I think we have a huge advantage, and we're starting to see a lot of traction. And a big aspect of things that we announced at Next is all around how we're enabling Gen AI in production environments. And so when it really comes down to it, what a lot of people have been doing is saying, look, I have particular sets of data for some of these customers. And you have to take this with a grain of salt, because who I talk to often are the ones who can't move the things to the cloud.
Sure.
Right. And so I want to be careful of the vast majority of customers. They're using Vertex AI, they're using Google Cloud, and they're very happy. The ones I'm talking to are the ones, a great example is Orange, right? They have particular customer data, customer conversations, PI that they have in 26 different countries. They can't move that data out of that particular country, or they need to process it on-prem. And so Steve Jarrett, the chief AI officer, is like, look, Brad, we've spun up and we're doing some tests, and we've been doing that for the last couple months, but now I got to get it into production. That means I need a production level LLM serving environment. I need production level compliance, security. How am I going to do continuous integration and continuous deployment? How do I manage all of that AI infrastructure? The other piece that we find is that AI isn't just a single aspect, right? So most of these applications, you have to build everything else around it. What's your data ingestion process? What's your management? How are you doing your serving? And so they're like, oh, I need to build an entire ecosystem around this to solve this particular business problem. And either I have to spin all of that up myself on-prem. Actually, hey, Google, is there a way I can get that from managed services so I can quickly deploy at the same speed that I'm used to and innovate so that I can focus my developers on building business value end applications versus doing undifferentiated heavy lifting, spinning up infrastructure, and managing services like Kafka or Spark or Kubernetes. Does that make sense?
It does, but you mentioned something really interesting. So is it really realistic to deploy AI on-prem, even if it's something that Google is offering with distributed cloud? Like, how much infrastructure would it take? Can you really run it on a 3-node? Like, I've been following distributed cloud for a long time, since its inception, and maybe before. So I understand from a hybrid cloud, from a extension of the cloud perspective, I get how that could be useful. But when we start talking about AI and Gen AI and some of the requirements, is it realistic to tell customers, hey, you can actually run this on-prem? Or are you talking about a subset, but you still need the cloud? Like, how is it actually happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe it's a point I should have been more clear about earlier. So we can go everything from a single node with a GPU all the way up to hundreds of racks and everything in between from that perspective. And so depending on the use case and the need, you're going to use different things. And so for some of our customers, they're already deploying types of AI on these single nodes. They're like, hey, I don't need the redundancy and the high availability architecture of your 3-node. And a single GPU can let me do inference on something like 24 to 48 different cameras, right? So that's one thing. And that's like a video inference. So that's not this new Gen AI that people are typically running. Now, separately on the Gen AI side, if I take somebody like an Orange, they're running this, I think Steve is saying they're putting off something like a petabyte of data a day, right? So they're doing large volumes of data processing on-prem, and they're using entire racks of GDC that they're deploying into their data centers and then processing and doing AI inference and LLM serving on-prem. Now, the typical pattern we find, and that we think is actually the best in class, is not to do AI training on-prem. The vast majority of our customers, they're saying, hey, I'm going to train in the cloud, or I'm going to take a model from the cloud. I might do fine tuning on GDC in my environment. And we're building, or we have the tools to do that with Vertex Workbench prediction and pipelines, allowing customers to fine tune those LLM models and then do that LLM production level serving on-prem. So that's the typical pattern we see with customers. Either I'm going to take one of the large language models from that was trained in the cloud and then bring it on-prem, maybe do some fine tuning on my own local data, or even do fine tuning in the cloud. It depends on the customer and what they want to do. And then I do my serving locally.
So you're finding that GDC is useful for these types of workloads, for highly regulated. I think you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned it. I believe it's for some kind of sovereignty for countries where they don't want to connect, or there is no public cloud there. GDC kind of becomes that, I don't want to say replacement, but that on-ramp, that ability to enable them to use some of these capabilities. What other use cases are you seeing out there that's connected to AI and Gen AI in particular?
I mean, I think when we're seeing it, there's a number of places. When it really comes down to some of the ones that we're most excited about, and we get a lot of traction with customers, comes down to how can they do not inference, RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, on their data sets. And these are data sets for some type of regulator. So this is maybe healthcare, maybe some of the financial industries, and sometimes for telco. And it depends. You said the word sovereignty, which I always perk up. We find sovereignty is this really wide range. And one of the things we help customers figure out is with Google Cloud, we can solve your sovereignty problem no matter what it is. But it's what's the right set for you? And it depends on, I think I said it earlier, it depends on the country, the industry, and then the workload itself. And so I'll have particular companies whose workloads, Orange is a perfect example. In Morocco, they have one set of criteria for this customer data, and then it's different in Cameroon and what they're going to do. And so that from a policy perspective, what we're working through with them, and they really like about GDC, is they're like, Brad, I can set a policy using Google Cloud that I deploy across all of my Google Distributed Cloud and Google Cloud deployments, so that I know that the right data stays in the right location, and then I can develop and consistently deploy to the different aspects. And so that's one of the things we find. So depending on the customer and the workload in that particular set of data, we'll have different controls that we have to put in place, or that they're going to have to put in place to really enable that workload. But yeah, one of the big ones we find is, depending on that, is how do I go and get insights out of that data? And so we're getting a lot of excitement from customers with retrieval augmented generation and using LLMs to really drive insights on data that has been maybe a little bit stagnant because it was on-prem and they weren't able to use the same tools that they've been able to use in the cloud.
So, I mean, we're talking a lot about on-prem. We're talking a lot about the edge. The on-prem data center, I mean, the biggest modernization that has happened to the on-prem data center is actually migration to the cloud. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens on-prem, but when you take a step back and you take a look at what's still there, it's essentially still a very highly virtualized environment. Do you think in today's world, with everything that's going on with AI, that those folks can continue to run this way without modernizing to something like a GDC that is AI empowered? Like, should there be a migration even before they get to the cloud to something like a GDC to take advantage of AI? And maybe a supplemental question, what if they don't? Like, will they be left behind? Those folks that decide, hey, we're not going to do this, is their competition going to thwart them, basically?
Look, I think those two questions can be slightly orthogonal to each other, right? So from the modernization is, I think what customers are finding is, how do I utilize my data? How do I innovate faster? The world's doing nothing but innovating faster. And so what we're finding is, maybe it's a result of AI, but what they're saying is, I can't continue to support legacy the way I did because it doesn't allow me and enable me to adjust and change my business and deliver the features and functionality to my end customers at the speed that I need. So what we're finding from customers is whether it's AI or not, they're like, I have to move faster as a business. I have these legacy applications, but they slow me down. So how can I quickly innovate? And so one of the beautiful things about GDC is you can run VMs, you can run containers, you can use modern architecture side by side, and they can tear off, if you will, pieces of that infrastructure to develop new features, functionality, capabilities, while you continue to have some of it on-prem. And so you start getting the benefits of modernization without having to lift and shift the entire thing over. And so that's the acceleration that we're seeing. Maybe it's because of AI, but ultimately people are saying, hey, I need to I need to innovate in my business faster. AI is enabling me to do that. This legacy is slowing me down. How do I get this into a position where I can change at the speed of what my business needs?
So are there resources that you're making available to customers that can help them on this journey? Like, do you talk to customers that are like, hey, we believe in this, we want to be able to do this? Maybe they don't know how to do it on their own. Are there resources, whether it's Google Direct or partners, that specialize in this in particular? Not a migration to the cloud, but in GDC, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things we were really excited about at Next. We have our new partner, certified partner program for GDC. And so we have partners from around the world, GSIs coming in and building entire practices around how to leverage GDC to help drive business innovation. That comes in both just the AI side, but also that modernization and that business acceleration that we were just talking about. Additionally, we're coming out with things like our reference architectures and our kind of our RAG, so retrieval augmented generation reference design. So this is just a solution that utilizes and it kind of puts together everything that we already have. So you kind of with one click can go and deploy and have your own on-prem AI or large language model based RAG solution, and you could start driving innovation in that tomorrow once you have GDC set up. And
so can I get AI to deploy AI?
It's actually really interesting. One of the things that's also great, we can't do this on the air gap side, but when we're connected, one of the benefits that's very different than what customers are used to with their legacy infrastructure on-prem is you have Gemini is looking at all of your infrastructure, including your distributed cloud infrastructure. And so what we're already seeing is we had some example and reference architectures that we did at Mobile World Congress, where people are using Gemini to help automate their telco network designs running on GDC. And so because of that, you could be asking Gemini questions around what's going on in my GDC fleet, getting insights from it, and helping you to deploy and manage more effectively because you have that extension of Google Cloud. You have that ability to see across your tens or even tens of thousands of deployments of GDC, depending on what your business needs are.
So you talked a lot about the benefits. I mean, obviously there's a lot of benefits to this, but what are you seeing in terms of showstoppers? What are the blockers? Where are the limitations maybe of this technology?
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about that, but like I said, it's ultimate power, but itty bitty living space. And so a lot of the times the things we do with customers and what many of our partners are fantastic about is helping you think slightly differently with your on-prem than with your cloud aspect. And so I think that's one of the things that I'm most proud of as the team is we try to be as open and transparent with customers about the limitations of space, right? Because I only have so many vCPUs and so much memory and so much disk that we have on-prem. And our goal with any customer is to minimize that because that's real cost for you and for you as a customer and me as a cloud provider. But how do we help you think creatively, use our services in the most effective way to solve those problems? Because ultimately you don't have that infinite feel of elasticity that you get in the cloud. And so that's a real limitation for whenever you go and deploy on GDC is knowing that it's extensible, meaning you can add more capacity over time, but it's not elastic because we just don't have you don't have 5,000 other customers using that capacity right next to you that you're borrowing from and using in between each other.
let's talk a little bit about small business. Usually, when I'm talking to my guests, we're always talking about what we can do with this technology, and technology is always accessible and available to enterprises, to large organizations first, because well, they have a lot of resources, they have a lot of capital, and they have a lot of human capital, people that can actually do it. But what about small businesses? What about those that might not have all the necessary engineers to do this? Is this technology ready today realistically for small business, or does it still need to kind of mature a little more at the McDonald's level before it makes its way? What have you been seeing? Do you feel like small business can take advantage of this as well?
No, we think it's ready today for small businesses, and that's kind of been a lot of our first adopters, right? When it
Okay.
comes down to it, uh, customers, if you're it's great if you're deploying at 30,000 different locations, for example. But also, if you're an SMB, you said the exact thing. You don't have that many developers, right? So, do you want to be the one who's taking time to go and patch your OS updates and think through your Kubernetes update strategy? Or do you want to let us take care of your firmware deployment, automated rollouts, so that you and your most precious resource, which is your team's time, can really focus on that value added aspect of this? And so one of the things I talked about in the beginning was we're really focused on how do we reduce TCO for our customers? How do we reduce that undifferentiated heavy lifting so that you can focus on the needs of your business and not just this, how do I get this thing up and running and stable and secure? And instead, let us take care of that, and then you can go and get your applications ready to deploy and be productive immediately.
It would be hard for me to not ask you a question about search. Google, at the end of the day, is a search company. So, how are you helping customers using AI, potentially using GDC, etc., of searching their own data, making sense of their own data? That's always been a challenge. I mean, there's always been enterprise search. I mean, there's been appliances that I've deployed in the past when I was a consultant, but it feels like this is very different than what we've done before. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of the things we're most excited about that we're launching on GDC actually is our kind of search solution. So it's our retrieval augmented generation solution. There's a number of things that really go into it, right? And so when you're trying to do enterprise search, you have a number of steps that you go through. First, you have just your data processing and data cleansing. Depending on what it is, with GDC, you might have a bunch of old PDFs or images that you need to go and convert that into text. You might have audio files that are in different languages that you want to search. You might have videos. You have all these different types of data depending on what your company's been doing or what you've had. So you have to pre-process all that. And we have a number of out-of-the-box APIs like speech to text, translation, optical character recognition that allows you to pre-process all of that information. The next thing is you got to go and you run that through embeddings, right? So vector embeddings really help us understand the difference of if somebody's searching for Apple, are they talking about Apple as the color red, Apple as one of the largest enterprises in the world, or Apple as a fruit? And so you get these vector embeddings. Google has spent a lot of time and energy building great embeddings engines. And so we bring that in with GDC and enable you to go and utilize that. That goes into your embeddings database, which Google has one of the best embeddings databases in the market with AlloyDB, which is our Postgres kind of based database engine that has kind of its PG vector extensions that really lets customers do incredibly fast vector embedding searches. So you put that all together. When you go and search for something, we go and look through those embeddings, find the relevant information, and then have our LLM, right, with our serving, go and read that information, summarize it, and provide it back to you with reference links. And this has been the thing that customers have gotten really excited about. And so it's kind of a grounded enterprise search. It looks at the information for you, reads it, provides you that summary, and then lets you know where did you find it. And so you can kind of click through. So that's the search solution that we announced at Next that customers can go and utilize today. It's resonated incredibly well with customers because it does a number of things. It gives them that enterprise search that they've been looking for. It gives them increased functionality because it summarizes for you. It reads that information and pulls out the most important parts. And it drives not only that, but it actually references it, right? Because we all want to know, where are you getting the information? Why
Right.
do you think this is true? And so it gives you those reference links that you as an end user can quickly use that to go validate, to ask it different questions, to learn more, or if you want to go and read the information yourself. And so we've seen a ton of excitement around kind of enterprise search and what we're doing with GDC that we're really excited about.
Yeah, finding the right information and summarizing it is always a challenge.
Yep.
In the cloud era, for the most part, there's been very staunch competition between the at least the top three hyperscalers, the AWS, Azure, Google. With AI, it feels a little different. Do you feel like with AI, you're moving more towards co-opetition with the other providers? Are we going to see true multi-cloud finally, or do you still feel like some of the providers are going to be kind of dug in on, hey, multi-cloud doesn't exist, we're just going to, you only need us? Like, do you feel like AI changes the conversation? And if so, kind of what is Google doing in that aspect? Because most customers are using at least two hyperscalers today.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for where Google stands on this and what we're seeing with customers, but we know our customers are like, hey, we want you to be open and compete for our business. And we love that. We're like, hey, we want to make sure we're building the best possible solutions for you. And so we have taken a very clear and open stance, right? We use open source as much as we can. We contribute back to community. We build our systems so that it's easy for you to migrate to the place that you think is going to be best. And then we believe that's the best way to compete. A lot of the things that we've been doing with our customers is we hear consistently is like, hey, I am using multiple places. How do you help make that easier for me? And so some of the best aspects of that are what we've done with our Omnis along the lines of, you can run GKE in multiple places. You can use AlloyDB Omni. You can use BigQuery Omni and multiple clouds. We have Cross-Cloud Connect, which I also love from a GDC perspective. Our cross-cloud network enables customers to utilize kind of Google's world-class network backbone. And as I talked about, it's fantastic for GDC because you get to utilize that when you're communicating with your tens of thousands of endpoints of GDC, but also you can do direct interconnect between multiple clouds and manage and move information and data. And so we're finding customers might have a particular application that they had moved to another cloud in the past. And now they're like, I want that data from that application and I want to use Google's AI or other infrastructure. And so how do I do that most effectively? And so we're trying to make it as easy as possible for customers to do that, as well as get consistent security, compliance, and policy while they're doing that.
So, Brett, I want to close with you. I mean, you're the product manager over a pretty big chunk of the business, at least the future, in my opinion, which is the edge. Because I also consider the on-prem data center the edge. I really don't think of it as, that single place and everything else is the edge. When you look at the future, what can you tell us that's maybe not under NDA? What can we expect in the next 6 months or 12 months? AI is changing things so rapidly. What can you share with us? Anything that you feel like, hey, this is definitely coming, we're going there, that's different than what we have today?
Yeah, I've actually been asked this a couple times, and I've said what I've found from customers is, depending on the technology and the trends, right? Things come in waves. A lot of times you're like, oh, once it gets to here, we're going to start really seeing adoption or whatever that might be. With generative AI, what I'm seeing is it's already there. It's already good enough to drive not even evolutionary, but revolutionary change for businesses. And it's about us enabling businesses to go and use it in the places they need and the data they need. So I think what you're going to see in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it's not if, but when customers are going to start changing the way they do business by leveraging generative AI, because the technology is already good enough. It's, have you integrated into your system? Do you have it production ready? Have you thought about how you want to use it, right? And so that's where I see the world going. I think it's an incredibly exciting time for GDC because we see this mounting demand from our customers to help enable them in that kind of part of their journey. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time.
Do you see any way for businesses around using AI? I mean, do you see any way that this whole AI thing is a bubble and it's going to burst and go away?
No,
Anytime.
it's funny. Sometimes you're like, where is it on the hype cycle?
Yep.
And like, I continue to be impressed with how people are utilizing it. And I think we're only at the beginning. I think that's my hypothesis, is that we haven't even started to scratch the surface how people are going to really utilize this. And that's the other thing I know, that I know enough now to know I know nothing at all, that 18 months from now, I'll be like, oh, of course, right now I could talk to you about RAG, and that's a very canonical example of how customers are using it. 6 months from now, there's going to be another way that customers are using it. 18 months from now, there's going to be 10 other ways that we're like, you can use any of these 15 ways of AI, and they're all going to help you really change what your business can do.
Yep. Brad, the conversation with you has been a lot of fun. I thank you for all the insights, the information. I think this was very educational. I want to thank our viewers, our listeners. I hope you guys all found this educational and informative. We're going to have to do this again, maybe 12 months. Let's see kind of, how much it's changed, so we can look back and say, 12 months ago, we were talking about RAG, that's so old school at that point, and see what else we'll have at the time.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All righty. Take care now.